Welcome to Career Week 2024. This session, of course, brought to you by Work on Climate, the world's largest open sustainability community, with something like 28,000 people collaborating in the open. And this is how to make sustainability part of everybody's job. This is all about the power of community organizing. Now, I know that many of you are really trying to figure out how to make that transition. How do I get a climate job, either in the organization that I'm in or potentially in a different organization that I don't yet work at? And I'm going to share a lot about my experience at Microsoft and how we leveraged our employee sustainability community to not just get people like me climate jobs, but to actually create an environment where as many people as possible could get climate jobs. We're going to show you how we did it. We're going to talk about why you should do it. And we're going to give you as many practical tips as possible to go forth and do that. I'm really sorry about that green squiggle. I have no idea why that's there, but let's just pretend it's that happy grass accident that we talked about earlier.
Honest, Tom says that he doesn't see it, so maybe it's
Oh, great.
for everybody.
Okay, great. Well, I get to look at my own failure then, and you don't have to see it. So yeah, as Pearl said at the beginning, this is a long workshop. It is 2 hours, but I promise you the time will go by very quickly. This is a kind of overview of the format, right? So we're going to move through some slides. There's going to be an expert lecture at the beginning here about what is an employee sustainability community. Then we're going to move you into some interactive elements. You're going to start with some solo self-reflection. We've got a digital workbook that you'll be working through. And the good news about that is that you get to keep it, you get to use it, you get to take it back to your companies as you go forth and organize after you've been energized by this session. And then we're going to put you in small group breakouts where you can work collectively in small groups. And we're going to bring you back and we're going to do some large group learnings. Then we're going to take a break because 2 hours is a long time. And then we're going to come back and we're going to do the same thing again. The second section is going to be all about the how. How do you actually effectively organize in your workplace to build power and influence? And then you'll go right back into some more interactive exercises. So if all of this goes well, you'll only have to hear from me for about 30 to 40 minutes. The rest of the time is for you because you have many of the answers that you need already. And if you don't, the other people in this call do. So this is very much about tapping into the collective intelligence of all of us that are here today. So let's do a vibe check because I run my sessions a little bit differently than most people. So this picture from an unnamed climate protest is really the most beautiful and succinct way that I can think to sum up what it is we're trying to do here. If we're going to change everything, we're going to need everyone. So this session is interactive. So if you came expecting to just sit here and not pay attention and do your other stuff for the next 2 hours, this is the wrong session for you. As I said, we're going to lecture for the least amount of time possible and give you as much time as possible to actually get your hands dirty, think through things, do exercises, meet fellow participants, network, all of that good stuff. So get ready to be interactive. The second thing, anyone can be a leader. Leadership has absolutely nothing to do with hierarchy. I know that might feel like the case in a corporate structure, but leadership is about showing up every day and empowering other people to become the best versions of themselves. All of you are capable of that, and we're going to give you a foundational understanding of how you can do that in workplace sustainability communities. At the same time, most of us are coming to this from very different places. Some of us are what I would call climate curious. We're just kind of wondering like, oh, this is interesting. How do I do this? Some might be subject matter experts with long careers in sustainability. The point is, there isn't a blueprint. There isn't a roadmap for how to build an effective workplace sustainability community, although I'm trying to get us as close as possible to doing that. So in that process, all ideas are valid. What works in one company might not work in another. What worked for me might not work for you. We're here to create an environment where it's safe to share, be open and experimental so that we can figure this out together. Side note, this is all about community organizing. So a lot of the way that we're going to learn is going to be together as for 2 hours, a tiny community. We are supportive, building off this idea that all ideas are valid. We're all doing our best. We're all just trying to figure this out. There are no bad ideas, and we're going to be sweet and kind and supportive to each other. We focus on action because the climate crisis is all about doing stuff. It's not enough to just be educated or inspired. You've got to go do things. And of course, my personal favorite, organizing gets the goods. And I'm going to show you how. Okay, I wanted to kind of start. I went to an in-person dinner the other night for a climate meetup here in Seattle. And I really, really liked this quote that comes from Kimberly Nicholas. This really kind of sets the tone for why we're here. So not going to spend a ton of time on this. Surely all of you understand at this point that the climate crisis is really serious. But this is one of the simplest and most succinct ways that I have seen anybody sum it up. And what I really want to focus on is the last part of that. We can fix it. It is tempting and probably very human to fall into moments of despair or climate anxiety when you look at what's going on around us. I sure do have moments like that. But what I have also found is that the antidote to anxiety is action. And when you organize with your colleagues, when you get engaged in a sustainability community like this, there's glimmers of hope on an almost daily basis where you can see light bulbs going off, where you can see people finding inspiring ways to make sustainability part of what they do or building impactful products or ideas. And so this is part of that vibe check. This is where we're at right now. We can fix it, and we're going to do it together. So if we're going to keep you captive for 2 hours, we have to at least tell you what the goals of the sessions are so that you can judge us at the end whether or not we did it. So the first thing is we're going to define employee sustainability communities and share good practices from my experience co-founding and leading Microsoft's employee community, which, as you can see here, over the course of 5 years grew to 10,000 members. We're going to give you the tools and resources needed to advocate for employee engagement in your organization. And we're going to define that here in a minute. It's a broader term than just employee sustainability communities, but it's an important part of what you're going to have to advocate for to create the environment, to create the conditions where a community like this can thrive inside your organization. Of course, we're going to share practical tips to help you organize a community where you work. And again, I'm here to learn from all of you as much as you might be here to learn from me. I want to understand common challenges and opportunities. Again, what works in one company might not work in another. So these sessions are very useful and informative for me as I continue to refine and do research and get us closer to, as I said, a blueprint for what this can kind of universally look like across all different kinds of companies in different industries. And of course, we're going to make new friends. We're going to learn in the open. And I'm going to have fun. And I know Pearl is too. So hi, if we haven't had a chance to meet yet, my name is Drew. I'm coming to you live from Seattle, Washington. This is the traditional territory of the Duwamish people. Unfortunately, they do not have federal recognition here in the United States, and so they have none of the benefits that come from that. So we're going to put a link in the chat right now to a website called Real Rent Duwamish, where you can actually pay rent to the tribe. It's something I do and donate a proceed of all of my work to. Even if you're not in Seattle, this is a really nice gesture that I would appreciate as a resident on their occupied territories. I am a founder not only of Microsoft's employee sustainability community, but also my own business. And so after getting laid off last year, I decided that the most impactful thing I could do for climate change was this: teach people how to organize effectively and create as many climate activists and as many organizations as possible. And so I started my own company, the Climate Leadership Collective, to do that. And I'll turn it over to Pearl so she can introduce herself formally with that big, beautiful smile.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, I'm Pearl. I am the founder of Need Workshops, a organization bringing people together on workshops like this on the topics that matter. And yeah, I'd actually really liked your question, Drew, because I always like to lead with, when people ask me what do, I always like to lead with what I love to do, which is wild swimming, listening to podcasts, and hanging out with my daughter. And I rarely lead with actually what I do for work, because these are the things I love. And I love what I do for work too. And Remy, who's Remy? Drew?
Remy's my dog, also my chief wellness officer. He makes an appearance in most calls. He has a kind of internal timer where if I get on a Zoom call, he thinks, oh, that's a great time to grab a toy and shove it into your leg over and over again. So nice. He keeps me sane. He also drives me a bit crazy, but he's cute. And I've also learned in my very long career that putting cute animals on a slide doesn't really hurt.
Never, ever. And we're also supported by an amazing team in the background, Barbara and Angela from Work on Climate team. So thank you to them.
Lovely. Great. Thanks so much. So my mission through the work I do in Climate Leadership Collective, through the volunteering I do with Work on Climate, is to make sustainability part of everybody's job. Plain and simple. Okay. So we asked you in that poll up front, what does sustainability mean to you? Apparently we can't see the results. We'll find them eventually. But I like to ask that because what the results reveal commonly is that sustainability means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And I've actually found that in all things sustainability related, doing this work, that is generally true. So to make sure that we are speaking a common language for the remainder of our time together, I'm going to lay out a couple of definitions. These are phrases that are going to pop up repeatedly through our workshop and our time here together. So let's make sure we know what we mean when we say them. So this is the definition I like to use for sustainability. It means to create and maintain the conditions for humans and nature to coexist for present and future generations. When we talk about employee engagement, what we mean is actions to increase employee participation in a company's environmental sustainability efforts. And when we talk about employee sustainability communities, sometimes called green teams for short, what we mean is a group of employees inside a company that are organized around the topic of sustainability. So the community provides structure and support for all of those employees to get educated, inspired, and activated on this topic. Now, spoiler alert, there's going to be climate memes throughout this presentation. I lost a bet not too long ago, and the bet was, well, I have to put climate memes in all of my presentations for 6 months, and I actually quite enjoyed the challenge. So I've actually made a few. This one arguably not a climate-specific meme, but I also love The Matrix and grew up watching that, and also think pop culture references are fun. So what if I told you that employee sustainability communities can unlock resources and job opportunities in the companies that you already work for? Would you take the blue pill, Pearl? Okay, so, oh, you're going to answer? Tell us.
You keep going, Drew. You keep going.
Okay, so we're going to start with how we did it at Microsoft, right? Because you saw that number. We got 10,000 of our colleagues organized. As far as I can tell, one of the largest and most influential green teams in any company. So let's take a look at how we did it. Now, these videos are notoriously finicky with sharing the audio. So I'm going to play it for a second, and then I'm going to stop. Just, Pearl, if you can just shout at me that you can actually hear the audio, and then I'll let it go.
Sustainability cuts across everything.
Yep, we can
Got
hear
it? Okay, here we go.
That we do at Microsoft. From how we run our core operations, develop and deploy our products and services, partner with customers around the world, and how we use our voice on critical policy matters. Everything that we do is by and because of our employees. Empowering our global workforce is at the center of our sustainability strategy.
Since 2018, Microsoft employees have self-organized into a grassroots sustainability community and found creative ways to leverage their experience, skills, and passion to help the company achieve its ambitious sustainability commitments to be carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste by 2030.
It started with a handful of us.
Now, with the help of Connected Communities program,
the Sustainability Connected community has over 6,000 members and 35 chapters across the world.
Our mission is simple. Make sustainability part of everybody's job.
Everybody's job.
Everybody's job.
The SEC gives every employee at Microsoft a chance to meaningfully contribute to the sustainable transformation currently underway.
It provides a centralized platform to educate, inspire, and activate our entire workforce.
And using the Power Up community, it gives everyone the tools and resources needed to create real-world solutions to the world's most pressing environmental challenges.
Most importantly, we are driving a wave of culture change and putting the health and well-being of the planet at the center of everything we do.
The SEC inspired thousands of Microsoft employees to find the unique ways they can make sustainability part of their jobs and personal lives.
All right, a trip down memory lane for me. That video is already a couple of years old and still so nice to see so many of my former friends and colleagues. But as all sustainability communities and good things, it started really small and really grassroots. Long before we got to make fancy videos that we could share with the outside world, it was literally just a handful of us that got together for the first time in the summer of 2018 on the Microsoft campus here in Seattle. And we just had a simple question, which is, what can we do as employees? How can we not only get Microsoft as a company to put more resources into sustainability, to step up and be a real climate leader, but how can we get involved? How can we create opportunities where every single person, regardless of past experience or job title, could find a meaningful way to contribute? And of course, back in 2018, we had a lot more questions than answers. But over the next 5 years, we really figured out a lot of how we're going to do that. So I haven't been at the company for a year, but when I left, the community was 10,000 members, almost 40 chapters around the world. We had members in more than 100 countries. There were 50 volunteer leaders who ran 10 global programs inside the community. And of course, we had tens of thousands of conversations happening every year inside the internal chat forums, which is where the real magic happened. That's where, in that peer-to-peer learning environment, you could actually watch the collective intelligence of the workforce go up on the topic of sustainability. Fortunately, even though this was a bottom-up grassroots employee organized effort, we did get top-down support from the company. You saw Microsoft's former Chief Sustainability Officer, Lucas Joppa, in that video saying that employees are the center of the strategy. And something to just note, we'll get into this a little bit deeper in the second half of the workshop after the break. Our community was a community of practice, not an employee resource group. So we'll get into the differences there. And then this picture comes from, I think, the 2021 Microsoft Environmental Sustainability Report. Like many companies, they put out an annual report tracking their progress against their sustainability commitments. And you can see, there we are right there in the report. So it was a really beautiful example of what happens when that bottom-up employee organizing meets the top-down support that comes from the company. And that's really what we're going to try and teach you how to do in your communities and in your workplaces also. Okay, so 10,000 people, 40 chapters, part of the strategy, that's cool. How does it actually work? So hard to show in a slide, but trying to make it nice and simple. There was just one community, a single global employee community. It is predominantly virtual for the obvious reasons of having people all over the world and also a hybrid workforce, but it did have a local chapter model because sustainability means something different in Singapore than it does in Seattle. And people wanted to be able to organize in sub-communities to influence sustainability in the subsidiary offices where they worked, or maybe organize in a better time zone or in their local language, whatever it was. So I bring this up because what I constantly see at other companies is the existence of multiple sustainability communities that might be doing similar things, but in a fragmented way. And so we're going to get into this a bit deeper in the workshop. But the best thing you can do is just make one community, one thing for people to find and join. There were two ways for those 10,000 members to actually participate in the community. So synchronously, things like this, live events. We ran a monthly call every single month in the community where we would talk about what's going on in the company, what's going on in the community. There was an open mic where any employee could ask for support for an idea for a project. We ran speaker series where we brought in sustainability professionals every month to educate employees on the ways they were working on sustainability. Moment in time things like hackathons. But then, of course, asynchronous opportunities that do allow people from all different time zones to contribute in whatever ways they want. This is a very, very critical part of community building. You have to create an inclusive environment where everybody can contribute regardless of what they've got going on. So that's where those chat forums came in, all those conversations. People could participate when they had time. Maybe it's just those 2 hours at the end of the week every Friday. And the community had 3 layers of resourcing. The first is that network of volunteers that I mentioned earlier. Over time, as the community grew in size and sophistication, we created an entire process for how we recruited, onboarded, trained, and then offboarded volunteers, because this is a really important part of community management. If you're relying on volunteers, people come and go. How do you make sure that the programs continue without interruption and that some amount of knowledge transfer happens between them? We also had the support, as I mentioned, of the Chief Sustainability Officer, who was the executive sponsor of the of the community. That allowed for some budget so we could make fancy YouTube videos that we could share years later with all of you wonderful people. But it also added legitimacy and support so that for the people who were volunteering a couple of hours a week to do this as leaders, they could say to their managers, this is supported by our Chief Sustainability Officer. This is an officially sanctioned thing. So that really helped too. And then that final layer of resourcing was, as I mentioned, this was a community of practice, and it was one out of almost 100 other communities of practice. So Microsoft had this program. All they did was organize these giant communities of practice that were a way for kind of collective knowledge sharing to happen. So we also had the additional support of that program. And I worked on that for the last couple of years. I was at the company. So okay, that's all cool, but what does the community actually do? Well, that's also pretty hard to put on a slide, but this has actually become one of the most popular slides I think I've had for any of these workshops. And so I'm going to give you a couple of examples of things that started inside the Microsoft employee community and have actually left not only the community, but the 4 walls of the company and have gone out and changed, in some cases, entire industries. And this is, I think, the best I could do in a format like this to actually articulate that premise of make sustainability part of everybody's job, or every job is a climate job. Because everything that you're going to see here on this slide came from people that did not have sustainability in their job titles. They were regular employees who said, I see an opportunity. I'm looking at the way that sustainability intersects with the job I already have, and I'm going to use this community to actually turn that idea into something real. So the first one is carbon-aware computing. If any of you are using a Microsoft Windows device and you're using Windows 11, this is now a feature that is baked into the operating system. Essentially, your computer will send a signal out to the electricity grid to see how much renewable energy is on the grid at any given moment, and wait to run compute-heavy workloads or updates when there's peak renewable energy on the grid. This is also something that Microsoft leverages at the data center level, which is an enormous amount of electricity. Sometimes a single data center consumes as much as a small American town. So you can see the potential for the carbon savings of waiting to run really energy-intensive workloads until there's renewable energy on the grid. This started as an employee hackathon project. A couple of employees said, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And they leveraged the community to do it. The surface emissions estimator. So Microsoft has a whole line of hardware products called Surface devices. There's laptops, tablets. And one passionate employee said, I want to be able to tell our customers what the complete environmental life cycle analysis of each device is, from the extraction of the raw materials through the production, the shipping, and all of the energy that it will consume as you use it. I want to be able to accurately give people a snapshot of that before they buy the device. And so it took a couple of years and a lot of really hard work. But again, a hackathon project, leverage the community. And now this is a tool. You can just look for it on the internet. If you just type in Microsoft Surface Emissions Estimator, you can find it. A really incredible example. The Sustainable Disposition of Customer IT Assets Guide. This one is always such a mouthful. So a huge part of Microsoft's business is convincing companies to leave their on-premises IT. So all the servers and racks, sometimes they run them themselves, and migrate to the cloud. In Microsoft's case, it's called Azure. What happens with all of that e-waste? What happens to all of the servers, the racks, the cables, the chips, the motherboards, all of that stuff when they do that? Well, in a lot of cases, they just get dumped into a landfill, and that obviously is super problematic. So another employee leveraged the community to say, we need to create a sustainable disposition guide so that we can share with our customers, here is how you responsibly recycle those materials. This also gets us closer to the principles of a circular economy. This is maybe my favorite example. For any of you software engineers out there, a couple of engineers at Microsoft said, how would we actually code for sustainability? At a code level, how would we actually embed sustainable principles into the work that we do as engineers day to day? Another hackathon project, and eventually it grew into what's now called the Green Software Foundation. So this is an international nonprofit full of academics and practitioners and software engineers that are literally redefining how to write code for energy efficiency. This is an incredibly impactful example when you consider how many software engineers are in the world and how much carbon savings, emissions reductions and savings there could be if they use these principles in the work that they did. Same thing for design. A bunch of designers at Microsoft got together and said, what is the impact of all of this digital stuff that we create? And so you might actually notice that this slide deck looks a little different. That's because it's a low carbon PowerPoint deck. It is designed with dark mode. It uses vector images instead of high resolution images. Now look, is a low carbon PowerPoint deck going to save the world from climate change? No. But is it a very tangible example of what happens when you get people who aren't sustainability professionals by training, thinking about how they could actually redefine how they do their work, and not only for themselves, but for all of their peers and colleagues? I think so. Of course, as the community grew in size and sophistication, we said, how can you expect employees to be actively contributing to your sustainability goals if you're not providing training for them? And so it took a while, but eventually Microsoft did create a company-wide sustainability training. Last time I checked, there was something like 15,000 people that had taken it. You really cannot underestimate the impact of what happens when people get up to a baseline of what we call sustainability fluency. This one I'm particularly proud of because it's a hackathon project that I ran for a couple of years. If any of you are familiar with the Ocean Cleanup, a really incredible Dutch nonprofit that was famously started by a 16-year-old with an incredibly ambitious mission to clean plastic pollution out of the world's oceans. We ran a hackathon project and gave them some artificial intelligence and machine learning models, and also helped them design some camera hardware that would make it easier for them to quantify plastic pollution in river systems before it gets out to the ocean. And then Microsoft became an official sponsor of the ocean cleanup, providing for many of their IT needs. Same thing with an organization called TerraPraxis. They're trying to convince coal power plant owners to leave the infrastructure in place, ditch the coal, and drop small modular nuclear reactors inside the power plant. If this takes off, it has the potential to reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by 40%. Another strategic partnership that Microsoft made with an organization that started as an employee hackathon project. And the last and maybe best example is this. Microsoft, like many of the cloud providers and tech companies, does an enormous amount of business with the fossil fuel industry, primarily to get them to find, extract, and burn more oil. Employees in the community held up the hypocrisy of this work and how it goes pretty much exactly against the company's own stated sustainability commitments over and over and over again. And eventually the company responded with a set of oil and gas principles, which put some limits and some conditions on the kind of work that the company will do with the industry. So this is just a tiny snapshot, and it's kind of hard to show this information on a slide. But this is, I hope, a good inspirational example of what can happen with these green teams. When you get beyond, we plant trees once a month, or we just do some recycling in the office, and you really, really turbocharge it and create the conditions where everyone has the confidence, the resourcing, and the community backing them up, where they can actually innovate entirely new solutions. And look, I know most companies aren't Microsoft. Most of you don't work for trillion-dollar tech companies that have all the tools and all the toys. But still, this is a very good example of what happens when you get organized with your colleagues and you work with your company to help unlock resources for sustainability. But if I could sum it all up in one sentence, what we did over the last 5 years at Microsoft was successfully change the paradigm of who gets to work on sustainability. Prior to the community, the only people in the company that got to work on it were the ones that had it in their job titles. We said that doesn't make sense, that doesn't scale. And by the way, everybody has something meaningful to contribute. And in this, we succeeded because the mission was to make sustainability part of everybody's job. Now I get to stop talking, and we're going to actually move into the workbook. So let's go ahead and drop the workbook into the chat, the link. I'm going to walk through the instructions.
Drew, just before we do that, there was a couple of questions, and we're not going to go into questions, but I think this is a nice one, which is about like, how do you actually convince leadership to give employee time for this? I was curious, was there some some resistance in the beginning, or did it actually come quite easily?
So we're actually going to be doing, I forgot to mention this at the top. This is a good reminder. We're actually going to be doing an Ask Me Anything in the Work on Climate Slack channel for a full week after this. So I'm not going to take any questions during the presentation to make sure that you have time for the interactive elements, which are the most important part, frankly. So save your questions, write them down. Maybe we can grab them from the chat, but we're going to give you the ability to post them. Again, this is an exercise in how to actually build community. By putting those questions in the Work on Climate Slack, you guarantee that 28,000 people can not only see your question, but can see my answer versus, I don't know how many people are on this call right now. So hold your questions, write them down. We're going to do an AMA after this.
Amazing, Drew. And so, yeah, basically you have the opportunity, as Drew said, to take some time for yourself to reflect and to, and we're going to share a workbook in the chat. I think, Barbara, if you can, there it is. Great. And this should be able to copy onto your system. So it is a Google Slides, and you can just copy this onto your system. And basically, maybe you can explain the exercise, Drew.
I'll explain it, and then I'll also pull up the workbook on the screen so we can look at it together before we give you some time to quietly do this yourself. In the past, people have said sometimes if they're on their corporate machine, there's permissions issues and you can't access the workbook. No worries. Like if you can't find it, just get a pen and paper. The exercises are pretty much the same, and we'll make sure that you have a way to do it. But this is going to be that first part of that solo reflection. So there's 2 exercises in this first part that we're going to do for the next 10 minutes. The first one is called a landscape analysis. So if you open up the workbook and you go to slide 3, you'll see that there's some prompts, and they're going to get you to think about what already exists at your company. Before you can go forth and build, you need to see what's already there so that you're not duplicating that effort. The second exercise is what's called a power mapping exercise. And this gets to the question that you brought up, Pearl, which is how do you actually influence stakeholders? How do you get that executive sponsorship? So when you go to slide 4, you're going to first choose a goal. It can be whatever you want. It could be get more influence in my organization or secure resources for my green team. And the point of the power mapping exercise is to think about who you're going to need to make that happen. Who are you going to have to convince to get you what you need? Who's going to be a potential ally? Who might actually oppose you? Who do you have more or less influence with? So let me drop this, bring up the workbook, make sure that there aren't any questions before we give you time, and we'll have you quietly work so I can go drink some tea.
Tea is important. And just give us a little thumbs up if you can actually download. I see Catalina has given us a little thumbs up, and just make sure that people are getting into the workbooks and accessing it. And let's see what we'll be doing, Drew.
Cool. Can you see the workbook now on the screen?
Yes.
Great. So the instructions that are there on slide 2, just walk through this very quickly. Your first exercise is in slide 3. So there's just some open text boxes. All you're going to do is sit quietly, and try to answer this. So what already exists in your workplace? Does your company have a sustainability strategy? Does it have sustainability goals? Does it have a CSO? Does it have a green team? Just take stock of what already exists in your company. How active are any current green teams or sustainability communities, if they do exist? And what is that overall strategy for your company? Do you have targets or commitments? So you're going to reflect on that and write it down. And then the power mapping exercise, again, you're going to decide on your goal. What are you trying to accomplish? And again, this is just a theoretical exercise. And then you're going to use these boxes and you're going to start writing in names. So maybe one is the chief sustainability officer, or one is my community co-founder who dropped off and isn't doing stuff. The point is, think about your goal, then think about who you're going to need to influence to make that goal happen. And then you can slide people around on here. Maybe you already have strong influence with them, so they go up here. Maybe they're an opposition, so they're going to go over here. The point is to figure out on this power map where the people you're going to need to influence sit, and how much influence you either already have or are going to need to obtain to make change happen. Any questions?
I have a couple of private messages saying people can't open the document. If you cannot open the document, then just grab a piece of paper and a pen. And what Drew will do is, Drew, maybe you could just put slideshows so that we can see the slide up in big. And then after a few minutes, he will switch to the other side and you can just map it out on pen and paper.
It happens.
It happens. It does. But I think that otherwise or download the PowerPoint, as Barbara just helpfully reminded. But yeah, if you're having trouble with either, then pen and paper is your way to go. So we'll give 6 or 7 minutes, Drew. Let's see.
Sounds good. Yep. I'll turn on some nice light music and then I'm going to go make some tea so I can keep my voice going.
Can you put it on slideshow? It's still on the background screen, Drew.
You don't see the workbook?
We see the workbook, but it's not on slideshow.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah, there it is. Thank you.
Cool. So that's the first prompt. Halfway through, I'll flip it to the second one in case you need it.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. I'll be right back. Happy workbooking. community organizing. What is it and how do you do it? But first, a meme. I actually made this one, so I need some validation. Can you please tell me that you like it? Pearl, you're not even looking at it?
I'm trying to plug in my laptop. I'm busy, Drew.
Okay, well, for any Lord of the Rings fans, here you go. Okay, so I mentioned in the front half that the Microsoft sustainability community was not an employee resource group, an ERG, which is, as far as I've seen, the most common structure, the kind of community that you would use to do something like this in your workplace. But I did want to just very quickly talk about the three kinds of communities that you're likely to encounter in a workplace environment. What's the same, what's different, and what is the right tool for the job? Because you might be reaching for a screwdriver when you actually need a hammer. So employee resource groups are by far the most common. There isn't a textbook definition for them. Trust me, I've looked, but as far as I can tell, these are affinity groups. They're about connecting people. They're around diversity, inclusion, and the protection of marginalized identities. They tend to be sort of unmanaged or have ad hoc collaboration, and they tend to have very basic community structures. Communities of interest, you're also likely to encounter in a workplace environment. This could be cat lovers of Microsoft or hikers of Microsoft, whatever. These are also unmanaged with ad hoc collaboration. They're pretty much just about getting people together around a shared interest. They might have a slightly more complex structure in terms of how they're organized. But then the real star of the show and what you should be aiming for in your community is as early as you can, because again, the point of building these communities is to build for growth. If you do this right, the community is going to get big. So you want to be planning for that future growth, a community of practice. So these, by contrast, are managed communities that have regular and formalized collaboration. They are knowledge sharing communities. It's all about connecting to people to resources, collaborative problem solving, harvesting that knowledge, centralizing information, right? We want the topic of sustainability on right on cue. My dog is throwing a rope around. I'll wait until it's really good and then show you. And these communities tend to be a little bit more advanced because they're managed and because they often have sub-communities. Like at Microsoft, we had the local chapter model. You might have sub-disciplines inside your community. Maybe there's a subset for carbon and water and waste management or whatever it is. So you may not be able to just get to this. It's actually kind of nice. And the way I've laid it out is to show it as a maturity curve. You kind of start simple and you work your way up. But I do want to encourage people to learn more about communities of practice, because as far as I can tell, they are the right tool for the job when it comes to sustainability communities. So this is a new slide. I always try. Come here, bud. Come here. If you want to see this. Remy. Okay. You saw my dog. He made an appearance. Hey, buddy. This is a new slide. I always try to add something new to the deliveries of this. People have often asked, like, what does it look like to watch a community kind of grow over time, not just in membership, but in sophistication and influence and all this stuff. So apologies, it's a busy and kind of ugly slide, but I think it gets the point across. There's kind of these three phases in your community maturity model. Your community is forming, then it's growing, and when you get up to a certain point, it becomes relatively self-sustaining. So at the beginning, it's all about, you've started it, you've created your digital infrastructure. So if your company's on Slack, probably you're going to want to go with Slack. If you're on Teams, if you're an email-centric culture at your company, whatever it is, you've decided this is the digital place where we're going to actually do all of this community organizing. You're going to be getting your first volunteers, your first programming. People are joining. This is a good time to seek that executive sponsorship, to go directly to your chief sustainability officer and say, hey, look, all of these employees are interested in sustainability. Wouldn't you like to support this free resource? And in the beginning, your community engagement is going to be low because you're just getting started. People don't know about it. The purpose is unclear. But as you get into that growing phase, you're going to begin by defining your mission statement. What does your community exist to do? And this should be 1 or 2 sentences max. It should be simple and easy to understand. At Microsoft, you won't be surprised to know that the mission of the community was to make sustainability part of everybody's job. And you can use that one if you want. It is not trademarked. So in the growing phase, your first volunteers are now helping you recruit your future volunteers. You're learning lessons from the first experiments you've tried with your programming. You're using that experience to inform improvements. Your executive sponsor is bought in. They're contributing to the community. Maybe you actually create surveys where you can survey your community membership and ask them, hey, what's going well? What could be improved? What would you like us to see to do differently? So that community engagement is increasing and the growth is rising in parallel as it becomes a thing that people can actually grasp and understand and join. And then finally, when you get up to this other level, community is sustaining. Your mission statement is clear. It's well known. People know why your community exists and what to use it for. You've gotten to the point where you actually have a defined process for recruiting, onboarding, and offboarding volunteers. Because as we all know, I saw several comments in the chat, keeping engagement from volunteers over the long haul is very, very challenging. So people are going to be coming and going. You're creating new programs, your sponsor is an active member of the community. Maybe they're doing fireside chats directly to the community or taking questions from employees. By the time you get to the self-sustaining level, your community has basically a defined and a predictable rhythm of business. Growth is steady. Well, I guess I said it twice, so the growth is really steady. So this is just kind of a rough outline of what this looks like. And look, we're going to talk about this again on another slide, but like this is going to take time. This, unfortunately, does not happen overnight. It takes, in some cases, years and a lot of very hard, very tenacious work from often a very small group of employees, a small group of dedicated volunteers who refuse to take no for an answer. So hopefully some of you are those people, but patience and persistence, because it takes a long time to build community. So let's talk about what your community should do. How do you actually get all of this stuff off the ground and go from you're just forming to you're self-sustaining? Well, I've created what I call the virtuous cycle of employee engagement. This is a 3-step process. Your community members can enter at any point depending on their level of prior experience. Maybe they've already got the fundamentals of climate change. They understand why there's a problem and what the solutions are. So they can skip the education part and move straight to inspiration. The point is, you need to create opportunities for your members to go through all 3 phases of this. So you need to educate them. What is climate change at a 101 level? What is happening? What are the solutions? What is our company doing about it? Only with that foundational understanding can people then level up and go, here's what I can do about it in a workplace environment. The inspiration part is important. People need to see examples of how other people have made sustainability part of their jobs. To take it from a theoretical, every job is a climate job. That's a nice sentence. Everybody likes it. But how do you actually show people how other people have done it? So wherever you can, show how it has been done. Highlight employees that figured this out. Celebrate their successes in front of everybody else. And then, of course, as I said earlier, this is all about doing stuff. It's not enough to be educated and inspired. You have to be activated. So as you build the community, again, you don't do all of this stuff on day one, but you're building for the future in mind. Create opportunities to educate, inspire, and activate your community members. That is how you get consistent community growth and engagement. If you build it, they will come. When people see that this is a vibrant place where hundreds or maybe thousands of people are doing stuff, they're far more likely to go from passive observers to active contributors, get off the sidelines, and meaningfully engage with your community and support it. So let's talk about how community work is different from a lot of the ways that we have been trained in our careers. So the first thing is most of us have been trained as we go through our careers that we accumulate this kind of subject matter expertise. We have this knowledge, we become experts in it, and then we zealously guard that information. No, that's my special information. That's what makes me special and employable. And you keep that to yourself. It is the opposite when you work in a community. The point is to work out loud and overshare. Again, part of the reason that I'm not answering questions in this webinar and instead funneling you into an asynchronous Ask Me Anything and Work on Climate Slack is because there's like 50 people in this call. There's 28,000 people in that Slack. So if we have that exchange in the open, everybody benefits. So that is, it takes a bit of retraining to put yourself in a community mindset. Work out loud. Show people how the tofu is made. Don't do it in DMs. Don't do it in private emails. Do it in the open. People benefit from seeing the exchange. Look, community work is really, really experimental. It's frankly like running a small startup inside a larger organization. And your company culture might be really supportive of that. You might work for a big old dinosaur company that wouldn't know what innovation was if you handed it to them on a silver platter. So you need to be experimental and you need to be willing to fail fast because there are no one-size-fits-all answers for how you're going to do this. Again, I'm trying to get us close, but you're going to have to experiment in your own company, see what works, learn, iterate, and move on from there. In the beginning, when you're building a community, less is more. It can be tempting to over-engineer. We've got 5 different things you should read. We've got 2 different places you can talk. We've got 10 calls this month. In the beginning, less is more. So simplify. One community to join, one mission statement, one call a month, or whatever it is. Start with less. Keep it simple so that people grab on and understand what this is. You will grow in size and complexity over time. Focus on asynchronous, on-demand resources first. Again, it is important to run things like live calls and create these moment in time opportunities for us to see each other and connect. Super important part of community building. But on-demand resources are more scalable and more inclusive, especially if you're working with community members across many time zones, like in a global audience. This gets back to what I was talking about on the previous slide. Patience, persistence, tenacity, discipline. You will be told no. You will be told stop. You will be told this has nothing to do with your day job. Why are you doing it? It takes a long time to build an effective community. An effective community organizer is like a monk, essentially, like patience, persistence, tenacity. It's going to take a long time. So buckle up and get ready and enjoy the process, because it's actually really, really fun to watch your community grow over time. And if you are relying on volunteers to do stuff in the community, always use the buddy system. A single volunteer is a single point of failure. So if you have volunteers running your calls or publishing your newsletter or moderating your chat forums, always use a minimum of 2. This also gets us closer to the culture of community, which is, again, all about working out loud and oversharing. It's about knowledge transfer in the open. Another meme. I'll just let that one marinate for a second. Got it? Okay. How to build an effective community. So this was part of your landscape exercise that you did in the workbook. It's tempting to go out and just, I'm so excited, I'm so motivated, I want to build something new. I saw these climate memes and I'm really fired up. That's great. I want to pour gasoline on what you're doing and turbocharge it. Wait, actually, that's not very good for the environment. Before you go out and reinvent the wheel, take the time to see what already exists in your company and leverage it. Is there an existing green team? Have other people tried to start a green team and ultimately failed? Talk to the previous organizers and find out what happened. Learn from their experience, see what already exists, and leverage that before you build something new. This goes back to something I talked about on the community maturity slide. You need to make your community's purpose clear. If you want people to join it and become active participants, they need to understand at a glance what it is for and why it exists. So you need to develop a community mission statement, and then you need to put it everywhere. And you got to say it so many times that you feel like you're being annoying. You have to make the community purpose clear if you want people to engage. Tell them why it exists. Oop, I went backwards. Make it easy to participate. Again, this goes back to some of the other stuff I talked about, like less is more, asynchronous on-demand resources first. Use the workflow that already exists in your company to start. Again, if you're email-centric, go to email. If you work in Slack or Teams or whatever, use the platform where everyone is already hanging out for work. Don't bring in some other weird product that people don't know about in the beginning. Keep it simple. You can grow in size and sophistication later on when your community gets a little further along. But you want to meet people where they're at. You want to make this part of their workflow. They don't have to go way outside of what they're already doing to find this. Whenever possible, align the actions of your community with your company's sustainability goals. This is critical to making sure that you are taken seriously and seen as a legitimate force inside the company, which is what will ultimately unlock that executive sponsorship and all of the great resources that come with it. So if your company has a goal to reduce its emissions by 2030, understand what that means deeply, learn about it, read about it, ask questions to your sustainability team, and make sure that your community organizes itself and aligns its actions to help the company hit those goals. Position yourself as a cooperative force in the company to unlock sponsorship and resources. I already said this. You're going to want to get executive sponsorship. I know it's challenging. There are no one-size-fits-all answers, but it can start with some questions. This is very much about relationship building. Who is your company's chief sustainability officer or equivalent? Is employee engagement part of the company's strategy? It can start with something as simple as a question. Go to them. Hey, I noticed that we have this strategy and these goals and these commitments. How do you think employees should factor into that? What about the 99% of us that don't have sustainability in our job titles? That creates a conversation. That's an invitation to pull up a chair and help them figure out how and why bringing along all of the employees in the workforce is actually going to be something advantageous that they should want. Once you're able to do that, then you can finally make the business case for resources. But I don't want you to get hung up on this point, because you don't really need a lot of resources to get a green team off the ground. In most cases, it's free. Your company's already provided the digital infrastructure that you need to organize. You're going to be using volunteer labor. Don't get hung up on the idea that you need money and resources. Those are nice to haves, not need to haves in the beginning. Okay, we're getting closer to the end because I want to make sure you have time for the workbook and the interactive elements. So this is teeing us up for the next exercise. So there are 3 ingredients for community management. There's people, process, and technology. So the people is all about the roles and responsibilities of the various parties that are going to be needed to run the community. Who are they? The process, this is something that develops over time. It outlines the things that the community is going to do. What is the community going to do to provide a consistent experience for members and ultimately create structural efficiencies for not only your current volunteers, but for your future ones? And I want to double down on the provide a consistent experience for members. That is the most important part of having a healthy and thriving community. Your members need to have a predictable, consistent experience. The last Thursday of every month is our community call. The first Friday of every month is our newsletter. Whatever it is, the more predictable and consistent of an experience you can create, the more likely people are to engage. And then finally, the technology, which is arguably the easiest of these 3. It defines the physical and digital tools that the community is going to use to communicate, organize, host events, create, share, and store important resources. Okay, so bear with me. This one's very busy, but this is an exact replica of what you're going to see in your workbook. I'm going to cover it quickly, and then you're going to get some time to think about it quietly on your own before you go back into small groups. So let's break this down. People. Here are some prompts and some questions to get you thinking about the who of sustainability community organizing. So, what are the roles of volunteers versus paid employees? Maybe it's somebody's job at your company to engage employees in sustainability. Maybe it's a purely volunteer thing. The point is you need to know. And the same thing for your community members versus your community leaders. You've got to define the roles and responsibilities for the different who's that are going to be involved in this. Who can join the community? This is actually a pretty simple one that a lot of people skip over. Is membership open to every single person in your company? Is it just a subset? Is it a regional thing? I don't know. But if you want people to know that they can join, you have to make it explicit who is able to join. Who is ultimately responsible for the community? Is it you, the climate activist who's really passionate about organizing in your community? Is it part of the sustainability team's official mandate? Ultimately, you need to decide who's responsible for it so that the buck stops somewhere. What role does executive sponsorship play? Maybe none in the beginning, but hopefully a huge one later on. And then if you do have sub-communities or local chapters or something like that, how are they going to be included in a larger national or perhaps international community? So you don't have to have answers to all of these questions on day one, not at all. But these are questions and prompts to get your wheels turning to, again, help you think about how you build a community for the future, for the long game. So for process, you're going to need volunteers, right? They're going to run programs. How are you going to find them? How are you going to recruit them? How are you going to onboard them? How are you going to offboard them when they no longer have time or interest? How long do they stay and what happens when they go? What are the defined rhythms of business for the community? Again, are you running a call? Are you doing a newsletter? Are you running a hackathon? Are you doing a volunteer tree planting event, a composting or recycling event in your office? Whatever it is, start to map out the rhythms of business for your community. Here's what we're going to do month after month, and stand up the programming that you need to do it and fill those programs with volunteers. Then you want to think about the user journey for your potential community members, your colleagues at your company. How are they going to discover your community? How are they going to join it? And then ultimately, how do you get them off the sidelines from passive lurker to active participant? You need to think about that user journey and how you're going to move people through that funnel. And then finally, as the community grows in size and sophistication, how are you going to document your own processes and your own resources so that you don't have to do this over and over again every time something changes? It's about handing off the baton to the next group of volunteers so that they can start and get right up to speed with everything you've already figured it out. Write it down. Write it down. Technology. What are the digital platforms that you're going to use to organize the community and its resources? Teams, Slack, email. What are the physical platforms? You're going to get together in person? Are you going to host events? Are you going to use Eventbrite or Luma? What are the physical processes? You're going to meet in the cafeteria, whatever it is. How are community members going to communicate with each other? How are you going to use live events? How are you going to use asynchronous events? And as the community generates stuff, resources, where are you going to store it all? So again, you do not need to have answers to all of these questions on day one. But you need to start thinking about it. And the more answers you have, the more likely your community will grow and thrive.